The Great Beverly Hills Retreat. The morning sun had barely kissed the tops of the tall palm trees of Beverly Hills when Jed Clampett stepped out onto the back porch of his massive stone mansion. The air was crisp, carrying the faint, sweet scent of morning dew and California flowers, but Jed was focused on something far more practical. He squinted toward the small, weathered wooden cabin that sat incongruously in the middle of the manicured estate grounds. "Good morning, Jeb," Jed called out, his voice a calm, deep rumble as he spotted the faithful old hound dog resting near the steps. "Breakfast ready yet?" Jethro Bodine, Jed's hulking, enthusiastic nephew, came shuffling around the corner of the porch, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and looking thoroughly disappointed. "Ready not, boy," Jethro mumbled, shaking his head. "Granny ain't up yet." Before Jed could reply, the heavy back doors of the mansion burst open. Ellie Mae Clampett, her blonde hair bouncing in its usual twin pigtails, ran out onto the lawn, her face a picture of pure panic.
Pa.
"Jethro!" Ellie Mae cried, her voice echoing across the yard. "Granny's gone. Her bed ain't been slept in." Jed frowned, his relaxed posture instantly vanishing. "What? She's plumb disappeared," Ellie Mae gasped, wringing her hands in distress. "Ain't no sign of her anywhere around the house." Jethro scratched his head, trying to apply his sixth-grade education to the mystery. "You reckon she went back to the hills with Alberta Bradshaw?" "No, sir," Jed replied, shaking his head firmly. "I seen her after Miss Bradshaw left. She wouldn't have gone with her." Jethro's eyes widened to the size of saucers as a dark, dramatic thought struck him. "I'll bet she's been kidnapped." "Oh, Pa," Ellie Mae wailed, tears welling up in her eyes as she clutched her father's arm. "Oh, please don't let no harm come to my darling little granny." Jethro looked at his cousin, momentarily touched by her display of affection, though his stomach quickly redirected his priorities. "That's real touchin', boy," Jethro said, nodding sagely. "Well, I sure don't want to have to eat Ellie's cookin'." Jed ignored his nephew's culinary anxieties and looked out toward the back of the property. A slow, knowing smile crept across his weathered face. "I think I know where she might be," he said softly. "Where, Pa?" Ellie Mae asked, wiping her eyes. "Well, ever since we put up the old cabin out back, Granny has had a certain look in her eyes," Jed explained, pointing a long finger toward the rustic little shack they had built to remind them of home. "I'll bet you that's where we find her. Come on." The three Clampetts marched across the pristine green lawn, passing by the various farm animals that Ellie Mae had brought to the mansion. As they walked, Ellie Mae couldn't help but greet her beloved pets. "Morning, Mrs. Hogg." "Mrs. Cow," she murmured softly, waving to them. "Good morning, chickens." As they approached the small wooden cabin, a rich, savory aroma began to drift through the air, instantly confirming Jed's suspicion. The unmistakable scent of sizzling pork and fresh dough made Jethro's mouth water instantly. Jed pushed the wooden door open and stepped inside the single-room dwelling. There, standing over a wood-burning stove that looked entirely out of place in Beverly Hills, was Daisy Mae Moses, affectionately known to everyone as Granny. She was humming a happy tune, turning over a large slab of ham in a cast-iron skillet. "Well, we kind of figured we'd find you out here," Jed said, leaning against the doorframe with a warm smile. "Granny, did you spend the night in that little old cabin?" Granny turned around, her eyes sparkling with absolute satisfaction. "I did," she declared proudly, wiping her hands on her apron. "And it was pure heaven." Jethro looked around the cramped, dusty space, completely baffled. "Heaven? This little shack?" Granny slapped her wooden spoon against the edge of the skillet. "Jeff, let's all move back in here where we belong and live the good life." Jed chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Granny, we ain't movin' out of no 32-room mansion into the stump." Jethro, however, was suddenly sniffing the air like a bloodhound. He crept closer to the stove, his eyes locked on the breakfast spread. "Something sure smells good." "I'm fixin' fried ham, whole cakes, and gravy," Granny announced, gesturing to the overflowing platters. The mention of such a feast instantly overrode any appreciation Jethro had for the luxury of the mansion. He turned to his uncle with wide, pleading eyes. "Uncle Jed, let's move in here and live the good life." Jed held up a hand, chuckling at his nephew's predictable reaction. "Wait, super stomach. Let me set the table first." Ellie Mae looked around the small cabin, a bit worried about the logistical nightmare of 4 grown adults sharing a single room. "Pa, is we really gonna move into this little cabin, all 4 of us?" "Well," Jed sighed, knowing exactly how stubborn the elderly matriarch could be. "If we don't, Granny ain't gonna give us no peace and no biddles." Ellie Mae, wanting to be helpful, turned to her father and cousin. "Well, if you want to stay in the mansion, I'll cook for you." Jed winced slightly, remembering Jethro's earlier comment about Ellie Mae's lack of culinary skills. "Well, that's surpassing kind of you, Ellie." "Well, I need to practice," Ellie Mae insisted cheerfully. "True, true," Jed agreed politely, before turning his gaze back to Granny, who was now glaring at them with her hands on her hips. "But if we don't do like Granny wants, we ain't never gonna hear the last of it." Jethro shrugged, perfectly content to sacrifice space for quality food. "Well, where'll we sleep?" "Well, you women folks can take the bedroom," Jed decided, pointing toward the small partitioned area. "Yes, there are meal spreader blankets in front of the fireplace for us." Jethro frowned, shifting his weight. "That floor's awful hard." "Well, it'll only be till Granny gets this notion out of her craw," Jed whispered back reassuringly. Just then, the front door of the cabin creaked open, and a short, stout man with a wide-brimmed hat stepped inside. It was Shorty Kellums, their old friend from back home who had been staying with them. "Oh, here you are," Shorty said, looking around the crowded cabin. "Morning, Shorty," Jed said. "Morning, Miss Kelly," Shorty replied, tipping his hat to Ellie Mae. "What you doing down here?" "We's fixin' to move into this little old cabin," Jethro explained proudly. Shorty looked at them as if they had all lost their minds. "Everybody, you're welcome to join us, Shorty," Jed offered generously. "You can bed down on the floor with Jethro and me." Shorty looked at the hard wooden floor, then thought of the massive, plush bedrooms sitting completely empty just a few hundred yards away. "If it's all the same to you, I'd like to stay in the mansion." "Well, you'll be all alone," Jed warned him. "I'll rough it," Shorty said with a quick grin. Jed raised an eyebrow. "Can you manage that big old place all by yourself?" "Jerry used to run a hotel by himself," Shorty pointed out confidently. "Elvin and Bradshaw ain't here to cook for you no more," Ellie Mae reminded him, referring to the house staff who had recently departed. "I'll make out," Shorty insisted. Jed looked at his friend skeptically. "That big old mansion is likely to be kind of cold and lonely without a woman's touch." Shorty paused for a moment, a thoughtful gleam entering his eyes. "Yeah, that's true. But I'll get along." "Okay, Shorty," Jed said, extending his hand. "Place is yours." "It's a deal," Shorty said, shaking Jed's hand vigorously, already imagining the freedom of having a 32-room luxury estate all to himself. The secretarial pool. Meanwhile, downtown at the Commerce Bank of Beverly Hills, Milburn Drysdale, the bank's anxious and money-obsessed president, was sitting at his large mahogany desk. His faithful, efficient secretary, Jane Hathaway, stepped into the office with a stack of folders. As she entered, she couldn't help but hum a little tune under her breath. "Madam and gentlemen from Beverly Hills, Hollywood. Move in here for fun and thrills, Hollywood. The food is good, and the rooms is large. And if you're pretty, there is no charge. Hinky-dinky party." Drysdale looked up, annoyed by the distraction. "Excuse me, Chief. Several girls from the secretarial pool would like to take a little extra time at lunch to go and look at a new hotel for women," Miss Hathaway announced, ignoring his scowl. "The answer is no," Drysdale said flatly, returning to his paperwork. "All they need is 15 minutes, Miss Hathaway pleaded. "They can take my car if you let them go." "The answer is no," Drysdale repeated. "Some millionaire has donated his mansion as a hotel for young working girls, and the rates are fabulously cheap," Miss Hathaway explained, trying a different angle. The answer is no, Drysdale said, completely unmoved by the philanthropic efforts of mysterious millionaires. It's located close to your house, and if you needed to have some dictation done some night, they'd be available, Miss Hathaway noted, leaning in. Drysdale didn't even look up. The answer is no. They'll work for nothing, Miss Hathaway added quietly. Drysdale's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly wide with interest. The answer is yes. Miss Hathaway smiled knowingly. You knew I'd give in. I ain't got an old sock, Drysdale muttered, defending his sudden change of heart. Yes, you're a regular marshmallow, Miss Hathaway said with a dry chuckle. Drysdale leaned forward, his financial instincts tingling. The rates are cheap, you say? Yes, the girls think they'll be able to save at least $10 a week over what they're paying now, Miss Hathaway replied. Drysdale gasped, clutching his chest. $10 a week, say, that's a lot for a working girl. Oh, it certainly is, Miss Hathaway agreed. The trouble is they'll squander it foolishly. Drysdale nodded righteously, instantly forming a plan to save these young women from their own financial ignorance. I'll tell you what, I'll withhold $5 a week from each girl and put it in a special Christmas fund. Miss Hathaway smiled warmly, touched by what she assumed was genuine generosity. Well, that's marvelous. You bet, Drysdale chuckled to himself, rubbing his hands together. I'll need all I can get next Christmas. Shorty's grand opening. A short time later, a group of young, enthusiastic secretaries from the bank arrived at the gates of the Clampett mansion. They walked up the long driveway, staring in awe at the massive stone structure, the sparkling fountains, and the perfectly manicured hedges. Well, this really is a mansion, one of the girls exclaimed, looking around in wonder. Look at the beautiful ground, another agreed. And the rates are so cheap. I wonder what the catch is. As they approached the massive front doors, the entryway opened, and Shorty Kellums stepped out on the porch. He was wearing a fancy vest, his hat tilted to a jaunty angle, and a massive grin plastered across his face. Hello, girls, Shorty called out smoothly. The girls stopped in their tracks. There's the catch, one whispered. Oh, Shorty's cute, another murmured, giggling. Yeah, and he's fun, a third girl added. Shorty spread his arms wide, welcoming them to his newly acquired kingdom. Welcome to Shorty's Hotel for Women, where you live in luxury for $1 a day. The girls gasped in disbelief. And that includes private room and bath, delicious meals, maid service, laundry, swimming pool, tennis courts, cocaine, and vineyard. Shorty listed off proudly, throwing in a few extravagant words he had heard around Hollywood without entirely understanding their meaning. For $1 a day? One girl asked, her eyes wide. How can you do it? Shorty winked smoothly. Volume. Come on inside and look around. He led the excited group through the massive foyer. The girls spun around, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors, and the winding staircases. Girls, look at this, one shouted. What a pad. This is super, another agreed, running her hand along a velvet sofa. You ain't seen nothing yet, Shorty bragged, swaggering down the hallway. Step into the main ballroom. It's free entertainment in here every night. Really? A secretary named Helen asked. What kind of entertainment? Music and dancing, Shorty replied smoothly. You have a dancing act? Helen inquired, tilting her head. For girls and a fella, Shorty said with a grin. Who are they? Shorty pointed to the group, then to himself. You four and me. The girls laughed, finding his confidence absolutely charming. One of them, playing along, crossed her arms and smirked down at him. Do you think we're going to be safe in this hotel of yours? Oh, of course, Shorty reassured her instantly. If anybody gets out of line, just call for the house detective. Where is he? Helen asked, looking around the empty ballroom. Shorty puffed out his chest and tapped his own sternum. Right here. Before Shorty could launch into another sales pitch, Helen glanced at her wristwatch and gasped. Girls, our lunch hour is almost gone. We have to get back to the bank. Mr. Drysdale will be furious. Shorty looked disappointed, not wanting his lively new guests to leave so soon. You can't leave yet. You ain't seen the place. I'll phone Miss Hathaway, Helen suggested, spotting a telephone on a nearby side table. She's a good scout. She'll cover for us. There's a phone in the lobby, Shorty pointed out. No charge for local calls. Back at the Commerce Bank, the telephone on Miss Hathaway's desk rang loudly. Because she was momentarily stepped away, Milburn Drysdale snatched up the receiver himself, his voice booming with authority. Mr. Drysdale's office. Oh, yes, Helen, Drysdale said, listening to the voice on the other end. He blinked, confused. Helen, who? Miss Hathaway walked back into the room just in time to hear him. One of the girls who's looking at the new hotel for women, she whispered quickly. Drysdale's face darkened with anger. He glared at his watch and shouted into the receiver. Tell them if they're not back in 5 minutes, they're fired. Chief. Miss Hathaway gasped, lunging forward. Hathaway.
Get me that phone.
Drysdale pulled the phone back, speaking into the mouthpiece. Where are you? On the other end of the line, Helen held the phone away from her ear, wincing at the volume. Just a moment, Mr. Drysdale, sir. She turned to Shorty, who was leaning against the wall. Shorty, what's the address here? Shorty scratched his head. I don't know. It's the Jed Clampett Mansion. Helen turned back to the phone. It's the Jed Clampett Mansion. Drysdale froze, his jaw dropping so low it nearly hit his desk. The Jed Clampett Mansion? The Jed Clampett Mansion. He looked up at Miss Hathaway in absolute shock. The Clampett family was the bank's biggest account, holding millions upon millions of dollars. If Jed Clampett was running a home for working women, Drysdale knew he had to be fully supportive. Helen, unaware of the financial panic she had just caused, continued talking. Mr. Clampett is the millionaire who donated his mansion for the hotel. He probably realizes how oppressed and underpaid your secretaries are. Drysdale swallowed hard, his voice instantly shifting into a sickeningly sweet, trembling tone. You think so? Why else would he do it? He cleared his throat loudly. Helen, dear. Now, you girls take your time. Helen blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in her boss's personality. In fact, why don't you take the rest of the day off? Drysdale offered generously, sweating profusely. Miss Hathaway will do your work. Oh, thanks. Helen cried joyfully. And Helen, tell your landlord that I send him my very best, Drysdale added, desperate to stay on the good side of whoever was running the estate. Goodbye. Goodbye, sir, Helen said. And thank you. She hung up the phone and spun around to face the other secretaries, a massive smile on her face. Girls, we have the rest of the day off. And, Shorty, Mr. Drysdale would like to send you his best. Shorty looked thoroughly confused, scratching his chin. I thought I had his best. But if he's got any better news, tell him to send them over. The sophisticated playboy. Back at the rustic cabin, Jethro was standing near a large wooden barrel, holding a heavy bucket of slop. He looked thoroughly miserable as he lifted a wooden ladle, pouring the foul-smelling mixture into the pig pen. Jed walked up, leaning over the wooden fence to check on their progress. Hey, Uncle Jed, look what Granny's got me doing, Jethro complained, pouting like a giant child. Good for her, Jed said with an approving nod. Jethro dropped the bucket with a loud clang, crossing his arms dramatically. But I'm a sophisticated international playboy with a 6th grade education, a member of the Jet Set. Jet Setters don't slop hogs. Jed looked at his nephew, thoroughly amused by the boy's latest delusion. They don't, huh?
No, sir.
No, Jethro insisted, puffing out his chest and trying to look worldly. We jets around betwixt Paris, Rome, and Tequila, and drinks Acapulcos. Jed stared at him for a long, quiet moment. You ain't never done none of them things. I sat on a jet, Jethro countered defiantly. That makes me a jet setter. Well, right now, you're a hog slopper, Jed pointed out calmly. And after that, you're going to be a cow milker. Jethro whined, stamping his foot on the dirt path. Please, Uncle Jed, let me move back into the mansion where I belong. Who, dear chores? Jed asked. Well, Ellie Mae just loves to do this here rube stuff, Jethro suggested, entirely willing to pass his responsibilities onto his cousin. He then thought of his friend up at the big house. Well, maybe Shorty is getting a mite lonesome up there all by himself. Jed rubbed his chin, thinking it over. Oh, I'll bet you he's just dying to have me join him. Like that. Well, Jed said slow and easy. You might go up and check on him. Just don't forget your chores later. Expanding the business. Back at the mansion, the party was already in full swing. Shorty had found an old record player and turned up the music. He was currently in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the 4 secretaries, happily dancing up a storm. He looked toward the entryway and noticed Jethro walking in, looking around in awe at all the beautiful young women. Shorty quickly broke away from the dance floor and hurried over to his young friend, pulling him aside before he could ruin the atmosphere. Stop by the bank and bring along the best of the rest, Shorty whispered to Jethro, treating him like a newly appointed assistant. Remember, single girls only. And if they dance this close, they get the cut rate. Jethro was barely listening, his eyes locked on the dancing secretaries. Hey, Shorty, where are you? Who's that? It's one of the hard hits, Shorty muttered, dismissing Jethro's questions as he pushed him back toward the door. He's supposed to be in the house. I'll get rid of him. See you later. Oh, here you are, Shorty, Jethro said, refusing to be pushed away. Good news. I'm moving in with you. Shorty frowned, entirely unenthusiastic about sharing his new paradise with a giant, clumsy hillbilly. That's good news. That's good news, Jethro repeated happily. He then looked out the window and spotted a sleek black vehicle parked in the driveway. Hey, whose car is that? Oh, Miss Jane's, Shorty replied casually. What's she doing here? Jethro asked, scratching his head. Shorty, sensing an opportunity to get Jethro out of his hair, quickly invented a story. Oh, she come by to offer me a job down at the bank working in the secretarial pool. Jethro's eyes practically popped out of his head. You staking it, ain't you? Shorty shook his head, sighing dramatically as if he were carrying a heavy burden. No, I don't think so. Shorty, that secretarial pool is full of pretty girls. Yeah, that's a trouble, Jethro, Shorty said, shaking his head with mock sadness. I'm getting too old for that kind of nonsense. Jethro grinned from ear to ear, tapping his own chest. I ain't. I'm just the right age for that kind of nonsense. Yeah, oh, I wish I was young again like you, Shorty sighed, executing his reverse psychology perfectly. Oh, come on, Shorty, Jethro begged, grabbing the smaller man by the shoulders. Let me have the job. Huh, Shorty? Huh, please? Huh, Shorty, please? Shorty pretended to think it over, looking highly skeptical. I don't know, Jethro. You'd likely get them girls stirred up to where they couldn't work. It's a doggone good looking. Jethro stood up straight, smoothing down his shirt. I'll force myself to look homely. Look at that. Shorty hid his smirk. Well, maybe. Oh, come on, Shorty, please, huh? Jethro whimpered. Well, okay. Shorty finally relented. Oh, thank you, Shorty. Thank you. Jethro cheered, practically jumping up and down. When you get to the bank, just go right on into the secretarial pool, Shorty instructed him. I'll arrange everything. I really appreciate this, Shorty, Jethro said earnestly, his heart full of gratitude. And to prove it, I'm going to give you half everything I make. Shorty crossed his arms, leaning back. Half or nothing. Big deal, Jethro muttered, though he was far too excited about the prospect of working surrounded by beautiful women to care about the financial loss. The Milburn Drysdale Christmas Fund. Back at the Commerce Bank, Milburn Drysdale was practically floating on air. He was pacing back and forth in front of Miss Hathaway's desk, a large ledger book tucked under his arm. Chief, I questioned the rest of the girls in the secretarial pool, and 3 more of them qualify for Mr. Columbus Hotel, Miss Hathaway reported, checking her notes. Drysdale stopped, his eyes gleaming with greed. What do you mean, qualify? Well, it's restricted to single girls, Miss Hathaway explained. Say, that's a great idea. Drysdale chuckled, opening his ledger and doing some rapid mental math. Let's see. That's a total of 7. $5 each. That's $35 a week. That makes over $1,800 a year for the Milburn Drysdale Christmas Fund. Miss Hathaway stopped typing, staring at her boss with a mixture of shock and disapproval. Chief, you're not going to really deduct that money? Drysdale looked at her as if she had asked a completely ridiculous question. How long have you known me? Miss Hathaway sighed heavily. You're going to deduct that money. You bet. Drysdale interrupted with a greedy grin. He tapped the ledger. Only one girl isn't interested. Why not? Miss Hathaway asked. Drysdale gestured toward the door. I'll let her explain.
Come in, Miss Bell.
A young woman stepped into the office, looking polite but firm. Mr. Drysdale adjusted his suit jacket and smiled warmly. Mr. Drysdale wants to know why you're not interested in the hotel for women. Well, I live at home, so I wouldn't save anything, Miss Bell explained simply. Drysdale leaned across his desk. Do you live in a mansion? Of course not, Miss Bell said, confused. Do you ride to work in a limousine? Drysdale pressed. No, I ride the bus. How much does it cost you? 50 cents a day, Miss Bell replied. Miss Hathaway frowned, stepping between them. What are you getting at, Chief? Well, I live next door to the Clampett Mansion, and she can ride back and forth with me, Drysdale revealed, looking incredibly proud of his own logistical brilliance. Miss Bell's face lit up with excitement. Gee, that'd be swell. I spend 2 hours a day on the bus. Well, my limousine makes a trip in 5 minutes, Drysdale bragged. He then turned up the sales pitch, knowing that adding her to the roster meant more money for his fund. It would be fun living with the other girls in the secretarial pool. And in a mansion, too. And it automatically qualifies you to participate in a special Christmas fund, Miss Hathaway added dryly, casting a pointed look at Drysdale. Miss Bell clutched her hands together. Wow. You're making it unanimous, then? Drysdale asked eagerly. All right, I'll give it a try, Miss Bell agreed with a bright smile. Drysdale slapped his hand on the desk. That's a smart girl. You make a wise move. Thank you, Miss Bell said, turning to leave the office, thoroughly excited about her new living arrangements. Life at the cabin versus life at the mansion. Down at the rustic cabin, Jed was sitting on a wooden stool, working a wooden churn back and forth. Ellie Mae was nearby, brushing the mane of one of her favorite horses. How's Bosky doing? Jed asked, looking over at his daughter. Just fine, pal. Ellie Mae replied with a sweet smile. She's going to get pretty near a girl. Oh, good, Jed said, satisfied. I fixed Granny's turn so we can have us some fresh butter. Just then, Shorty Kellums came walking down the dirt path from the direction of the mansion. He looked relaxed, entirely unbothered by the fact that he was supposed to be managing a giant house all by himself. Well, how's everybody out here? Shorty called out cheerfully. Just fine and dandy, Jed replied, pausing his churning. How's everything up to the mansion? Great. Just great, Shorty said, leaning against the cabin wall. If you get lonesome, you can come get Bosky. Jed looked confused, glancing toward the animal pen. No, I'll let Granny stay here. Shorty blinked, realized his misunderstanding, and pointed toward the pen. Oh, you mean this Bosky? Yeah, Jed chuckled. Granny stepped out of the cabin door, carrying a large wooden bowl. Hello, Shorty. Hi, Granny, Shorty greeted her. Well, finish your chores, everybody, Granny ordered, looking at Jed and Ellie Mae. Victuals will be ready soon. Good, Shorty said, rubbing his hands together. I'm going to need a lot of food. Jed raised an eyebrow. How come? Shorty scrambled for an excuse, not wanting to admit he was hosting a house full of hungry bank secretaries. Granny, he's feeding Jethro. That's it. Oh, yeah, I forgot, Granny said, nodding. Well, you and Jethro come down in a half hour. I'll take our victuals up to the mansion. Shorty shook his head quickly. How come? Granny, there wouldn't be room at our little table. That's it. Oh, yeah, I forgot, Granny agreed, remembering Jethro's massive appetite. The way Jethro eats, we could get elbow gored. Oh, yeah, Shorty agreed, backing away slowly before they could ask any more questions. "I'll be back for vittles."
Bye.
As Shorty hurried back toward the big house, Jed watched him go, a thoughtful look on his face. Shorty seems to be getting along fine up at the mansion. I reckon him and Jethro thinks of things to do.